flesh-eating nightmare in nature's grip. The jungle has always been a place of mystery, a world where life and death dance in the shadows. But tonight, something is terribly wrong. Under the eerie silver glow of the moon, a white tiger moves through the undergrowth, its powerful muscles rippling beneath a coat of ghostly fur. Once the undisputed ruler of its domain, now it carries something unnatural, something horrifying, across its shoulder, and down its side. Its flesh has been eaten away, revealing a ghastly honeycomb of raw, infected tissue. The wound oozes, the edges curling like something alive, like something burrowing deep into its body. The great predator twitches, shuddering in pain, but this is no ordinary wound. This is a living disease, a parasitic nightmare. This tiger is not alone in its suffering. It has fallen victim to something ancient and relentless, an invasion of bryozoan moss, a nearly alien-like colonial organism that thrives in water, but now festers within living flesh. The living death. What is bryozoan moss? Bryozoans, also known as moss animals, are typically harmless. They live in rivers and lakes, forming strange gelatinous structures. Their bodies no more than a collection of tiny filter-feeding creatures, each one no larger than a grain of sand. But under the right conditions, these organisms can turn into a flesh-rotting nightmare. Normally, they cling to underwater surfaces, rocks, driftwood, even the shells of turtles. But when microscopic fragments enter a wound, something sinister happens. The colony doesn't just feed, it grows, it spreads. It replaces living tissue with its own alien structures, turning muscle into sponge, flesh into something that should never exist. The infection starts small, almost unnoticeable. Tiny, translucent patches dot the skin, mistaken for mud or dried blood. But beneath the surface, the real horror unfolds. The microscopic zooids, the individual creatures that make up the colony, begin secreting a calcified structure, burrowing deeper, replacing flesh with their own living exoskeleton. In a matter of weeks, the host is riddled with brittle, honeycomb-like lesions. For the white tiger, every movement tears at its own body. The bryozoan infestation hardens, weaving into its very muscles, turning soft tissue into something closer to coral. The once majestic predator, built for silent, effortless hunting, is now a prisoner in its own decaying body. A nightmare with no mercy. Unlike traditional infections, this isn't bacterial or viral. Antibiotics won't help. The immune system doesn't know what to do. The body tries to fight, but the enemy isn't like anything it's evolved to recognize. The tiger scratches at its wounds, trying to rip out the invader, but it only makes things worse. The microscopic zooids multiply even faster when disturbed, expanding their reach, and soon the smell sets in, a sickly, marine stench, the scent of rotting meat soaked in seawater, like something forgotten on the shore, something left to bloat and break apart. As the days pass, the lesions deepen, bone is exposed, organs struggle, every breath is a battle, and yet the colony continues, feeding, growing, consuming. The white tiger, once the apex predator, is now something far worse. A living reef, a moving corpse, an ecosystem of its own suffering. Why does this happen? Cases of bryozoan infestations in large land mammals are exceedingly rare, but not impossible. Scientists believe that warming waters, pollution, and altered microbial ecosystems have created an environment where these organisms can survive in ways they never have before. Some biologists theorize that animals like the tiger may contract the infestation by wading through contaminated swamp water or hunting prey that carries microscopic fragments of the colony. Once inside the body, the zooids do what they do best. They build, they spread, they consume. And the worst part, there is no cure. A predator's final days. The jungle floor is silent. There, now little more than a moving shell of its former self, lies curled beneath the twisted roots of a tree. The wounds pulse, seeping a thick, foamy liquid. The once white fur is patchy and mottled with brackish stains, like something dredged from the bottom of the ocean. It doesn't move much anymore. The fight has left its body. The eyes, once burning with the fierce hunger of a hunter, now glaze over, distant, unfocused. The great predator's body has become a prison, its flesh hollowed out, devoured not by time, not by age, but by life itself. Eventually, the jungle reclaims it. Scavengers, insects, decay. The circle of life, but twisted into something grotesque. Even in death, the tiger's body remains riddled with bryozoan structures, calcified, fossilized, a reminder of the invasion that took everything. The jungle takes no prisoners. It doesn't care about strength, speed, or dominance. Every creature, no matter how powerful, is just another piece in the endless cycle of life. And sometimes, that cycle twists into something unnatural, something horrifying. We've seen what happens when a predator like the white tiger is invaded by a colony of tiny, mindless creatures, a living organism that spreads like wildfire through its flesh, consuming and replacing it, turning muscle into brittle coral. But not all invaders build. Some dissolve, some rot, some turn the body into a garden of nightmares. If you thought bryozoan moss was terrifying, wait until you meet an enemy that moves in silence, an invader that takes root from within, breaking the body down cell by cell. This is where the nightmare deepens. This is where we meet the true horror of the jungle, fungal growth, the fungus that eats the living. We think of fungus as something harmless, a bit of mold on bread, a toadstool rising from the forest floor, a harmless puff of spores drifting in the air. But in nature, fungi are more than just passive decomposers. Some of them don't wait for death. They bring it. Fungal infections in animals are nothing new. But when they go beyond the skin, when they take over the body from the inside, that's when things get disturbing. Imagine a tiger, already weakened, already hollowed by the bryozoan infestation. Its immune system is barely holding on. Its body a battlefield of pain and decay. And then something new takes root. It starts small, maybe a tiny lesion on the gums, a patch of peeling skin on the paw. But fungal spores don't need a big opening. They slip in through a scratch, a bite, even a breath of damp jungle air. Once inside, they wake up, and then they grow, turning a predator into a fungal host. Fungi don't eat flesh the way animals do. They don't have teeth, claws, or digestive tracts. Instead, they send out microscopic filaments, hyphae, that burrow deep into tissue, breaking it down at a molecular level. They turn solid muscle into something soft, something spongy, rotten, filled with filaments spreading like roots through the body. The tiger, already suffering, starts to change. Its movements slow. The muscles in its legs feel tight, stiff with fungal growth weaving through the fibers. The claws, once razor sharp, begin to crack, splitting at the tips as tiny fungal strands push their way into the keratin. But the worst part? It's happening inside. Spores carried through the bloodstream reach the lungs, the brain, the very core of what makes the tiger a tiger. The lungs, instead of filling with air, start filling with fungal masses, tiny pockets of soft, pulsing growth that make every breath harder than the last. The brain, the very center of the tiger's predatory instincts, begins to rot from the inside. It doesn't even know it's dying, but it is, a death unlike any other. The skin splits open in places, revealing patches of dark, spongy matter underneath, like the inside of a rotting log. The once pristine white fur? It's now covered in strange branching growths. Yellow, green, even black. Some of them look almost like mushrooms. Some pulse when touched, releasing clouds of spores into the air. At some point, the tiger stops breathing. Not because its body gives up, but because its lungs are no longer lungs. They've been replaced, hollowed out, filled with something that isn't the tiger anymore. But even in death, the fungus is far from finished. The final transformation. Days pass. The jungle reclaims what's left. Insects, scavengers, rain. But the tiger's body doesn't just decompose. It blooms. Fungal stalks rise from its corpse, bursting through the skin, the muscle, even the bones. The spores drift through the jungle, riding the wind, waiting for a new host, a new victim. And maybe, just maybe, one of those spores lands inside another predator, slipping into the lungs of a jaguar, a panther, even another tiger. The cycle begins again. A final thought. Nature doesn't need fangs to kill. It doesn't need venom, claws, or raw strength. Sometimes, all it takes is something microscopic, something that grows in silence. And fungi? They never stop growing. So, next time you see a patch of mold in your kitchen, maybe, just maybe, give it a little more respect. Because out in the jungle, there are creatures who never got the chance to run. And they didn't even know they were dying until it was too late.